Hello and welcome back to the channel. And this is the second episode of us building a simple frontend for the game list API that we built in the previous series. We left off with some stuff done. We set up the routes. It's fine, and I believe we are also displaying the fetched game list. There's stuff missing, as you can tell. One thing we're missing is, for example, being able to navigate from the table to the details by clicking on a table row. And I think we can start with that. And so there are a few approaches here. One thing that you might think of is to use the link element from the reach router, and then what you do is basically wrap everything in here in a link component. Here you'd have to specify, I believe, two property, which we could calculate as games and game ID. You can just use the ticks here. That would be perfect. That would kind of work, right? As you can tell, but it screws up our styling. That's because the table row now has only one child, which is not a table cell, but rather the A element. Of course, we could try and work around this with the display property, display column group, for example, or something like that, but there's no need for that. We can go back, delete this, and we can do dynamic navigation. If we get the use navigate hook from reach router, we can then get an access to navigate property. Navigate, thank you. And here simply we can create on row click method where we'll pass game ID. Sorry for that. And just get rid of that nonsense. Okay, maybe that will help. We'll call navigate games game ID. Okay, with that method done, all we have to do is to add onClick method on our row, and here simply call it on row click with game ID. That should be fine. There's no need for that, but there's a need for table row. Yeah, thank you. That should be good. Okay, so when it compiles, now we're good with the click. Although this isn't looking too good, so let's go to Material UI table documentation, and there are a few things that I would like to add here. One thing is that hover effect, which is cool. So let's check that. This should be This should be somewhere here, like with basic table, data table, dense table, sorting and selecting, maybe here. There's just one specific property that we need. Hover. Okay. Let's go with that. So this was on table row. Yeah. So let's add a hover here. Table or row. Row 1. Let's try that again. Okay. Now it hovers. It would also be a good practice to indicate that given element is clickable, not only with that cool hover effect, but also with change of our cursor. So we'll quickly create a style for that. And I always forget, does this take, yeah, this takes an object. Table row, cursor, big pointer. Then we can get classes. Actually, I kind of enjoy this this type of styling given you by default by Material UI library. Be minded that there is a way of using styled components with Material UI, and it's very easy to configure. Classes, all we need here is a class name equal to classes table row. That done, yeah. Now we get that. So with this out of the way, I believe we can work on our details page. Get quick sip of water. Okay. So details page. For now, it's completely empty. That's fine. First things first, let's get our data. For that, of course, we need to use the effect. Call it once. And there might be a case with when the game ID is undefined, right? And this is a case when we open games path. Okay. So actually that doesn't sound good to me. Games new, let's call it. Okay. So if we log our game ID right here, you can see it displaying here, which is fine. Come on, let's get rid of these warnings. Okay. And now that's more like it. So we have an ID here, which is present here, but if we go to new, we'll see that this is undefined, and we have to handle that case in our effect. So what should happen with the initial data loading when there's no game ID? Well, actually nothing. There's nothing to retrieve from the API, so that's just not. Then we could call getGame method that we will create. GetGame. Do we have it already? No, not really. Here we can create states API PS. We'll call get game method. This is going to take game ID as a string. And this is going to be a synchronous method. And we will get our data from API get this is games with game ID. That should be correct. Let's return that and return that actually, please. We'll export this. Looking good. And let's run that. I could use async await. Let's import that. Also, I can mark it. Return the promise of a game. And the type of the answer here should be a game. And this is correct now. So then let's console log it for now. This has a missing dependency, which is true. It should be rerun every time the game ID is being changed. So let's go to network tab. Let's try this. And we can see that the call is performed and the proper data is being retrieved from the API. But that's not enough, if you ask me, because what happens in our app when someone specifies the ID that isn't pointing to the new web page where we will create actually new entries, and the ID that isn't on our list, for example, I don't know, something like that. As you can see, what will happen is that we'll perform the call to the API, but we'll receive an error and the status is 404. Game with ID was not found because, well, game of given ID does not exist in our database or file or storage. So we have to handle that. There are many ways to do that. One that comes to mind is we could catch an error here. Let's see, we have an error. This error, okay, this is like this. And let's see now. And in the console, you will see that it is being properly cached. So whenever you perform an asynchronous operation, one thing that you have to have in mind is whether there could be an error and how to handle that. That could be some kind of write error when you're trying to write a file that doesn't exist or user doesn't have an access to. Or maybe you try to perform some kind of API call that server isn't able to fulfill, hence the 404 or error that you see on the screen. So with that, let's try handling the error. Can use simple state variable to handle that, and that's gonna be string or null, because we'll start with null indicating no error, and whenever someone passes some kind of information, label, what have you, that will indicate the error. So here, just handle that issue, and voila. Let's see if let's do the conditional rendering. If we have an error, we'll just render it. Come on. Yeah, the problem here now is that we're trying to render an object as a child. So just to make sure what we're doing and what property I'd like to render, let's stringify that object for now, just to look inside of it. And the error, let's see, there's a message, there's a name, the stack, there's a config, well, I would expect something like data to be here, but let's live with that. If we have an error, we'll just set error. There was an issue with retrieving your game. Okay, but yeah, that's good, but still, can we do better? Because the answer here is pretty informative. So error, let's see. Actually, let's do that. Is there data property here? So I feel like there should be. No. Let's see. Axios read error response. Error, there's a response data. Okay. Cool. How about that? It is undefined. How about the response? Also undefined. Okay. That might be because, well, we send JSON stringified. That should be good. I just don't know where it is. It's still undefined. Oh, because not that. That you dummy. Oh, that's not the one. So I was looking at the wrong thing. Meaning probably. Yeah. Okay, good. There's a data and there's an error. I know it had to be somewhere there. And with that, nice, you have a nice error message. What we can do additionally is to just bump it up a little bit. So make styles, text field. Well, we don't need that yet. Error we need. Set the color to red. Set the font size 20 pixels, and let's set font weight to bold. Let's get classes, and we'll add that here. Okay, that's cool. This is good. Now, finally, let's handle the happy path. So the case where we actually should get something. We will create another state here. Game and set game. This is going to be use state game or no, indicating that we don't have anything at the start. And then we will set game to game. This is alternative to using the async await, of course. And it should work for a proper URL. Nothing changing here. But here we can use it. So what we need actually is to create a form where we will use these values, the game values, to populate that form. Okay, I will start with nice title. So this is going to be typography, and the variant is H1, and then there's, let's say, details, or maybe let's call it, if there's game ID, we will set it to game, well, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? If there is a game and there is a game ID, right, then we should use game name. If there's no game ID, we'll call it new game, and if there is no game, set to empty string. That makes sense. Variant. Looks like that is proper. Okay, cool. Now about the form. Just create a simple form with a few text fields. So will that work? Yeah, cool. Actually, this is self-enclosing tag. So we don't really need that. And now the value should be, well, let's maybe start with the name. It's an ID. Then we have a game ID, or if it's a new game, pass an empty string. You can create a label which is of ID, place holder which is ID. We'll create an text field class here, just to give it a little bit of spacing. This is going to be margin bottom 16, should be good. Classes text field. Okay. This is looking more or less good. Actually, you know what? Copy that. And this is going to be the name. This is going to be the price. This will have to have a type of number. This is a price, and price. So this has to be the name, and name. Text field is not defined. That's the problem. Okay, no worries there. Just import this. And sometimes you have to save it twice. Let's see. This is good. It's looking fine. Although I would rather see it set up differently. Now it spans as a row. I would like to see it in a column, but we can fix that with a box. And box comes from the material UI, and you can use it as a wrapper with some of the default properties that you'd like to have for a container. So I don't need to create a class to style it as I would have for a simple div, because it has some of the CSS properties built directly as an HTML attributes. So I can specify align items here, justify content, center, and the flex direction is supposed to be column. And box is not defined, of course. Now, that's what I wanted. One thing that we need for the form to be able to submit it is, of course, a button. It's going to be submit button. I'm going to give it a variant of contained and color to be primary. And we have, we have to import that. Variant, container, contained, yeah. Small typo there. And now we have nice looking form. So, have to dig a little deeper here. And let's try actually doing something when user submits our form. So let's check on submit. On form submit, we'll create a function that will be called whenever someone presses the submit button. And here's a case that we need to call that method on submit. So let's see where this actually triggers. Nothing. We can fix this by giving the proper type to our button. It should be submit. Okay, and this is interesting, right? Because for some reason, our URL was changed, and if you can see this, our page was reloaded, and all of the values we had in our form, they were appended to URL as a query params. Well, this is due to the fact how the browser and all of the web development was handled in the days, the good old days, right? And this reminds me of the time I worked with PHP servers, where this type of form submission was pretty much standard. That the page was reloaded, the params were added to URL. Of course, this isn't what we wanted. We're building modern single-page applications. So let's try handling the reload of the page and adding the query params to URL. We don't want that. So this is going to be React. It's going to be React event or just event. Should be good. Will prevent default, which, let's see. Come on. If you invoke, yeah, it will cancel the default operation. So let's try that. Oh, actually, we have a type here, form event handler HTML form element. Yeah, so we can specify that here. Then we don't need that. And the correct type is form event running on HTML form element, even better. Thank you, TypeScript. Okay, AFTT that does not exist. Okay, let's try submitting now. Yay! Actually, our own submit method is being called. So now what we have to do is get the values that are in our form and pass it to our API. So I believe these values should be somehow linked to what we have in a state, right? So let's try that. On change, we'll call on form value change, and we'll create that function in a second. Let's just add this everywhere for now, and let's think about that. We'll get an event And this is going to be a React change event running on HTML input element, if I remember that correctly, and it compiles, so that's fine. So now let's see actually what is happening. The value that I need is of course target value is target name. Let's try changing something. And as you can see, we're getting the new value, at least after the one click, and the name of the form. Okay, so how we can use that to update what we have in the state? Well, what we'll do for now, call setGame. We'll use the previous value, because we know this is an object. We will spread the previous value just to copy it. Well, we should actually turn an object here. Okay, it's more like it. Well, actually, the game can be null here. So we have to figure it out, because we might not have the game, for example, when starting building a new game. So we have to change this a little bit. We will return a function. We'll check for the previous value, right? If there's no previous value, well, that's very simple. We just have to create new object, looking like this. This should be value, of course. And if we have a value, we will return new object where we spread and copy the previous value, and we'll get the target name set to target value. Okay, and there's one problem here that I don't like, because I know that the values here are always referring to the type of game, because that's what we're working with right here. But this type of dynamic entry change cannot be resolved to a proper type. So let's just cast this, and let's see. And also we have to cast this. That should be good. What about you? Maybe mistake, because neither type sufficiently overlaps. Okay. As unknown as game. Okay, so we have to do some typecasting here. Of course, there are better ways to handle that. You could use something like React hooks form, which has a full support for TypeScript. And I will say that you can basically always default to that solution when building forms. I just wanted to, do it by hand. So let's see whether we can control our input right now. Let's see, EFT, let's say Kharkov. And as you can see here, I'm able to change the value and it is reflected above. So this has been going for 40 minutes now, and I believe it's good time to stop. In the next episode, I will show you how to update the game in the API, how to add a new game and delete a game, and basically that should be it. So yeah, I hope I see you in the next episode. So leave a like, maybe comment, hey, maybe even subscribe if you'd like, and I will see you in the next episode. Goodbye.